See me?
Yes, I can.
And so just let me know if I need to avoid picking my nose or something. You'll be recording this both audio and video?
Yes, I will be.
Okay, fine. That's fine.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, please?
Yeah, my name is Jim Doherty. I'm 64. I've been an environmental lawyer for my entire professional career. And I've always been very actively involved in volunteer causes such as Sierra Club leadership. And I had a case about 20 years ago involving light pollution down in the Caribbean and the adverse effect of light pollution on sea turtle reproductive behavior. And that introduced me to the International Dark Sky Association. I became a member. And within the last few years, I was invited to join the board of directors. And I was honored to be elected president of IDA about 3 years ago. So that's the capacity in which I now serve.
All right. And what does the Dark Skies Initiative do exactly?
Well, we call it it's the International Dark Sky Association. And for 27 years, we've been the international leader in efforts to control light pollution. Light pollution is caused by outdoor lighting that's either too bright or unshielded or improper color. And it has quite a number of adverse effects, including adverse effects on energy use. Bad lighting typically wastes energy, which creates air pollution as well as climate change. Bad lighting is bad for ecosystems. We're learning more and more about the adverse effect of glare, urban glare, suburban glare, light pollution on animals, and particularly birds, but also mammals, also fish, and also ecosystems and plants are affected by light pollution. Artificial light has adverse effects on human health, and that's been documented increasingly over the past few decades. And we're also concerned that people are losing their connection with the glory of the star-filled night sky. Most urban and suburban dwellers these days don't get a chance to enjoy the stars that many of us older folks grew up with.
Hmm.
So there's a lot of good reasons why we're trying to control light pollution.
All right. And then you kind of just glossed over the negative effects on humans and the ecosystem. Can you elaborate on that a bit more?
Sure. We've known for 20 or more years that when you introduce artificial light into a nocturnal ecosystem,
Hmm.
that predators, nighttime predators like owls, for example, are disadvantaged because owls excel at predation in the dark. And when you light up an ecosystem, then other competitors like peregrine falcons, for example, can become nocturnal hunters. So that's been our message for a long time. But increasingly, studies are showing that, and it's not surprising because we've evolved over the millennia with darkness at night, but there are a lot of species that are adversely affected. For example, fish. There's a bridge in Northern California called the Sundial Bridge. It's in Redding, California, and they recently, about 3 years ago, they put new lighting over the bridge,
Hmm.
which shone down into the Sacramento River. And what they found is that migrating salmon would no longer pass the bridge because there was too much light in the water. And so their reproductive behavior was affected. They had to change the lights.
Hmm.
And there's more and more studies about adverse effects on fish. We know that too much light at night is bad for birds. Birds fly into buildings that are over illuminated, and migrating birds are distracted by brightly lit urban centers. And finally, plants. I'm not a biologist and can't explain the fine points, but plant health and reproductive activity is also affected by that. So light pollution does a whammy on the natural environment.
Hmm. And you also talked about the color of the light. Can you elaborate on that, please?
Yeah, well, so we've had artificial light for about 100 years
Hmm.
since Edison invented the incandescent light bulb. And it began to spread around and be used for night lighting. And the incandescent bulb, which predominated for maybe 80 years, it has kind of a warm yellow light. And when we began to evolve the technology and use sodium lighting, that too was also at a warm light. But for the past 10 or 15 years, LEDs have taken over. And now there's a global revolution in installing LED lighting, particularly for streetlights. An LED is often a very bluish, cool light, as opposed to the warmth of the incandescent and the sodium. And what we're learning is that blue light has lots of adverse effects. It's bad for human health. The blue light blocks human production of melatonin, which is a sleep inducer. Melatonin is also important as an anti-cancer hormone. So it's the bluish light that affects us. Bluish light also adversely affects our ability to see stars. The blue light, when it reaches the sky, scatters in a way that creates a lot of glare. In fact, that's one reason why the daytime sky is blue, is because the blue light scatters. And so when we send blue up at night, it blocks our ability to see the stars. So color is important, and IDA is asking all the LED vendors to reduce the coolness, to use warmer light, and the standard that we've set up, the benchmark, is called color temperature of 3,000 Kelvin or less. That's our standard, 3,000 Kelvin.
And are there any other ways that communities could reduce the amount of light pollution in their in societies, like with like street lamps, or just using turning off lights in their houses?
Right. Street lights are the biggest single problem and probably the most easily solved. And what we call for street lights is that they be shielded so the light goes down.
Okay.
In my city here in Washington, D.C., the government is fond of these big globes that send light in every direction, including straight up into the sky. Not only is it very wasteful, because light that goes up does you no good, but also it produces all these adverse effects. So we're trying to that's point one, is to get the lighting shielded. This applies both to street lights and to other outdoor lighting, whether in residential lighting, commercial lighting, pointed down. The same as you do in your home. We don't hang bare bulbs in our homes. We shield them. We use lampshades. Well, that's what we want outdoors. Secondly, we want just the right amount of brightness. We have standards on how much brightness is needed for streets, for sidewalks, for walkways. And we say, let's adhere to the standards. So often we find that outdoor areas are overlit, and that's wasteful and doesn't help you see things. Secondly, as I mentioned, we want the color to be right. And so a lot of communities have changed from the very cool blue LED light to warmer lights because they find it more pleasant and it's better for you. And the final point 4 in our simplified campaign, is to use technology to turn off the lights at night. Either turn them off with a switch or dim them. We've called for street lights to be dimmed at midnight. In Europe, it's very common to dim the output of the lights by 50% or more between, say, midnight or 1 a.m. and 5. Also, motion sensors are a very effective way of reducing the light pollution, but still providing safety. So particularly in dark areas, alleys and whatnot, motion sensors that turn them on and off will achieve a lot of these objectives.
All right. And what do you think the cost would be for implementing these new new functions to the lighting system?
Well, I'll tell you, as a career environmentalist, I worked on a lot of campaigns. And frequently, the environmental movement has said we need more pollution control. And yes, it will cost more money, but it's worth it because of the environmental and human benefits. In the case of light pollution, what we find most of the time is that using smart lighting pays for itself. For example, if you have globe lights that are sending half or more of their light up into the sky, and you put reflectors on them to shine the light down, you can use half as much energy, half as much electricity. And so the savings there, you can save 50% of your energy cost. The same is true with dimming systems. If you use less light, you're going to spend less on energy. So for the most part, the changes we're calling for will pay for themselves, which makes this, I think, a really powerful campaign.
All right. And one last question. Have you ever, well, you already kind of answered this, but have you ever seen the night sky? And also, can you describe that experience?
Well, I'm a lawyer, not an artist, but I'm also a backpacker, and that takes me out into wild areas. Like I was in southern Utah just 2 weeks ago in Zion Park and Bryce Park. And the majesty of that, sort of the billions of stars that you can see, really can produce an emotional reaction in most people. It certainly does in me. And I sometimes get goosebumps thinking about it. And it's just as important as what's lost. So I live in a city, and most of the children here can't see the stars, or if they can, they can only see a dozen or so. So what happens is they get disconnected from nature. When you're out in the wild, you understand that we play a very small role in the cosmos and that we're surrounded by beauty. City children don't really get that. And so we're concerned that their values may be skewed because of this late polluted environment in which they're growing up.
Mm. Yeah, I actually had a an interview with somebody else who said one of the same exact things, and then she said that her and her husband would take inner city children to the to eastern Kentucky and show them the forest, and they were so disconnected from nature that they were more afraid of the sounds of nature, like uh, just nature in general versus loud city streets and gunshots.
Well, sure, right. So it's a broader problem. But what we also find is that when some people go out into dark areas, green spaces, and they see the blaze of stars, they often think, "Oh, look, there are clouds up there. It's cloudy, it's
Hmm.
misty, or something." You know, that's just the way the stars are. They're so dense and so bright that they literally fill the sky.
Hmm.
And so we wish everyone could have that kind of experience.
Yeah. Oh, I wish for that as well. Excuse me. There's at least two or three other people in my documentary group who haven't seen the full night sky with no light pollution, and I was planning on just taking them out to somewhere in eastern Kentucky where there is no light pollution or not as much light pollution.
Right. Well, you'll find maps online where the
Hmm.
darkest places are identified.
Yeah.
Two pieces of advice are: go during the near the new moon. If
Yeah.
there's a
Yeah.
full moon, that'll affect your stargazing. So make sure it's a dark night, and obviously you want clear weather.
Hmm. I know there's a dark sky for dark skies initiative forest in northern Tennessee, right on the border of Kentucky, where they try to reduce the amount of light input or output, excuse me, around there.
Right. One of our many programs is that we certify parks, reserves, and even sometimes communities if they meet two criteria. One is that they have great stargazing, they have fairly dark skies, so it's a place where people can go and enjoy the night sky. And secondly, they need to have smart lighting, good, well
Hmm.
controlled, shielded lighting that's not too bright. And if they can meet those criteria and they apply to us for certification, we often grant it. So we've granted our dark sky place certification to, say, Death Valley,
Hmm.
and to lots of other communities and parks around the world.
All right. Thank you very much for this interview.
Okay.
Would you like me to send you the link to the finished video?
That would be great. I'll share it with my media people.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Bye.
Have a nice day.